There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between radio and bar talk, between commentary and recaps, and it lies between the pit of man's Netflix subscriptions and the summit of his binge-watching ability. This is the dimension of podcasting and the Twilight Zone. These are the Zone-i-Sodes. And now your hosts, Brandon Davis and Scott McFarland.
And hello to all of you out there in podcast world. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies and TV. I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and this is episode 25 of Zone-i-Sodes. This is our 156 episode trek that Scott and I have embarked upon here to go through every single episode of the Twilight Zone from beginning to end. And Scott, how's it going?
We're only 11 episodes away from being done with the first season.
I know.
And when we started talking about this, Brandon, when we started talking about it's now, we're recording in July. This episode's going to drop first part of August. But when we started talking about this thing in January of this year, I thought maybe it would work. Maybe we could get through it. But, man, we're like chugging along here.
We are. And it's actually great that we're going that we're going along. But actually, we have a very special guest this episode, and we're really thrilled to have him, Scott. But let me have you introduce him for us.
Yeah, I love how you passed the hosting buck, Brandon. That's fine.
It's, I love to share the wealth.
So this is one of the reasons why I love podcasting, and the reason why I was really excited to get into this a couple years ago when the Front Row started rolling is the podcasting community allows for people from all over the world and all walks of life to come together and kind of share their, for lack of a better term, their nerdism, their geekiness. And one of the people who we reached out to and was excited to come on, we're happy to have him, was Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert is a co-host, is it the way to do it, with Collider Heroes, which you guys are doing now weekly, daily, because you're crazy and do stuff daily. You know Robert from many of things he's done, including being the director of the excellent movie from 1998, Free Enterprise, which I watched when I was in college and I enjoyed it then. I actually rewatched it for this, and I still enjoy it, so that was great. But Robert, we'll just go ahead and toss it to you and just say hello to folks, introduce yourself, and tell us what you're up to and what you're not up to, because you're up to everything.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be here, and I have to say that when you guys contacted me about talking about the Twilight Zone is one of my favorite things of all time, and along with classic Star Trek, the Twilight Zone and classic Star Trek really were the two. I hate to say this, but they were the two things that really shaped my worldview. And it's
not a bad thing.
The Twilight Zone was what really made me interested in the art of storytelling. And I think that if anybody wants to be a writer or anybody wants to tell stories, whether they want to make television or they want to make movies, you have to watch The Twilight Zone, because the way The Twilight Zone tells stories, how, as I said before, how it sets up a premise and a protagonist and a situation with such economy. The half hour, the 4 seasons of Twilight Zone that are half an hour long, which really means they're like 25 minutes or something with commercials at the time, it's all genius. And people forget, Twilight Zone is now sort of ubiquitous. Everybody knows about Twilight Zone with the marathons, and it's sort of become this pop culture icon now. But back in the day when it was relatively new, the Twilight Zone was fairly shocking. And at the time, there was some of the great writers that wrote for the Twilight Zone, whether it was Richard Matheson or, of course, Charles Beaumont, and then, of course, Rod Serling, who wrote so many episodes. And the Twilight Zone also at one point brought a French short film, The Occurrence of Owl Creek Bridge. That was groundbreaking for a TV show to be like, well, tonight on the Twilight Zone, we have something different. But yeah, it's an amazing series, and if you haven't caught up on it, I highly recommend getting the Blu-rays, because they're so cinematic, those episodes, and you know, even the way they reused stock footage from movies like Forbidden Planet was amazing. And I love the Twilight Zone, and it's an honor to be here with you guys. But I guess so people know who I am. I mean, for 25 years, I've kind of been banging around Hollywood working as a low-budget journeyman filmmaker, and I've edited a lot of low-budget movies. I was a producer on the Agent Cody Banks movies. I produced a horror film, The Hills Run Red, that Warner Premiere made, and I've done a lot of special edition DVD and Blu-ray documentaries. I worked on Lord of the Rings and the X-Men movies and Chronicles of Narnia, and I worked on the high-definition restoration of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I made a 3-hour documentary on the making of Superman Returns. And then a lot of people know me because I wrote and directed Free Enterprise that I hope was going to launch my directorial career, which has been sputtering ever since. It's the only feature that I've directed, but I hope to get back in the directing saddle soon. But right now I'm editing a low-budget indie film called Tango Shalom, which is a Jewish spiritual quest dance comedy that you all don't know you want to see, but you really do want to see it. So
a couple of genres wrote into one there.
It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of heart. It's brought to you by one of the producers of My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and you'll notice a lot of character actors from New York that are in it. It's a lot of fun. But I do love film editing. There's a movie playing on a low-budget Twilight Zone-esque time travel thriller called Paradox. You'll find in the basement of Netflix somewhere. It's still on Netflix. I edited that film, and you can watch that. And it stars Zoe Bell from Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof, and Malik Yoba, who was recently on ABC's Designated Survivor. So you can see that. And then I'm also, like you guys said, I'm on Collider Heroes every week talking about comic book movies. So I've kind of turned my geek obsessions into a semi and hopefully full-time professional gig. But, you know, I jump around. I do different things. I mean, I love editing, and I've edited a lot of low-budget features, and then I like producing, and I like writing and directing. So basically, I call myself a filmmaker, but, you know, everybody wants to pigeonhole you. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. And I tweet too much. So that's...
Well, I like your tweets, so it's okay. Now, I have one request for you, sir, and that is since you did the Star Trek TNG remasters, I know you have control over this. I need my Deep Space Nine remastered so badly. I know it'll never happen because it's going to be so much money to do, but...
Yeah, look, you know, the restoration, I only worked on the special features, which 50 hours of programming, and thanks to Ken Ross.
Just 50 hours, nothing.
Oh, it's amazing. But it took 4 years and an army of people and upwards of close to $15 million to remaster Next Generation. And a lot of people don't understand how much work actually went into that. And Deep Space Nine would take a lot more work. And it's just, I don't know if anybody's going to spend 4 years and that much money.
Yeah, and that's there's been a lot of talk about that, and the fact that TNG obviously had the bigger fan base, but Deep Space Nine was the first Trek that I grew up with, and I watched the pilot on, and so I need my Deep Space Nine on Blu-ray. It'd be amazing.
Well, I love Deep Space Nine, and I think the fan base loves Deep Space Nine. And you know, it was Star Trek's first real foray into serialized storytelling, especially the latter seasons. And they did such a great job. And what people forget about Deep Space Nine is that the cast of Deep Space Nine, especially the secondary cast, everybody from Andrew Robinson and Mark Lamo and Casey Biggs, who played Damar, and Salome Jens, who played the founder, the head of the founder, the head founder, you know, and Jeffrey Combs as the Wayoons. I mean, God, there was Louise Fletcher as Kai Wynn. The characters on that show are just amazing. And then the entire principal cast was great. I mean, as soon as they shaved Avery Brooks' head and gave him the goatee, man, he kicked some ass. So,
when he became Hawk, he was ready to go. When he became
Hawk, I mean, I love that.
Brandon's like, I know a couple of those people.
That's okay. That's okay. But no, I love Robert, I love what you said though about Twilight Zone being cinematic, which is exactly why Scott and I decided to do this, because we were doing a movie podcast, and he's very much into the genre type film, sci-fi, and everything, and I'm into the classic era of Hollywood, which is my expertise and everything. We thought this is a perfect show to kind of converge those two fan bases that he and I have. But
what's amazing too is that the Twilight Zone was sort of the crossroads, of where so many classic Hollywood actors
in
the latter half of their career wound up. Like so many young up and coming actors, people like Robert Redford, started their career. So the Twilight Zone, the pedigree of the Twilight Zone really represents a lot of Hollywood history.
Absolutely.
And it's fantastic. And the fact that it came out just prior to really when color TV took off. I mean, I'm so happy that it is all black and white, because I think it would have been diminished had it been. Classic Star Trek looks the way it looks because of color television and the demands that were made on the show, the producers by the network. But the Twilight Zone, because it's black and white, and some of those episodes are just, I mean, I think about things like The Obsolete Man.
Oh, I love that episode with a passion.
Oh, and the use of the black and white photography. And then also, of course, Eye of the Beholder, the classic episode where black and white. I mean, there's just so much great work that went on in the show. And I'm a big fan of black and white, even in the 60s. I mean, the stuff that John Frankenheimer did with James Wong Howe, like
Manchurian Candidate.
Seconds and Manchurian Candidate, and James Wong Howe shot like the sweet smell of my success. The sweet smell of success.
That's a great movie.
Some of my favorite films.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we're talking about this episode that we're talking about today has got some great Hollywood pedigree, because it's got one of my all-time favorite actors in it, Roddy McDowall. And Scott, what we always do before every episode, Scott writes a clever plot synopsis. So Scott, would you like to regale us with your plot synopsis for People Are Like All Over, which is the episode we're covering?
Before we do that, you're breaking tradition once again, Brandon. You did this last time when Catherine was on too.
Did I do that?
When we have somebody new on, you have to ask them a question.
Oh, sure. Robert, what's your favorite movie?
I've actually two, and I hate to say it, but they're rather cliche now. But I would say The Godfather and A Clockwork Orange are my two favorite movies. But the funny thing about A Clockwork Orange is it's a vestige of my rebellious teenage rock and roll metalhead off my parents. I mean, Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director. But when I saw Clockwork Orange, I was 14 years old, and I thought it was the most transgressive, insane thing I'd ever seen. And while it's still a wonderful film, and I still believe in its message that even if you choose to do evil, it's better that humanity has free will. It almost feels like it's a vestige of my teenage years by calling it, but it really kind of is. But The Godfather remains a timeless classic. But I have so many favorite movies, like, The Manchurian Candidate is one. One of my girlfriend and I, one of our favorite modern films is Amélie, the Jean-Pierre Jeunet film, which is just a genius piece of cinema that I never get tired of watching. But I have so many movies that I love, and it's so hard to pick just one. But I'm with you. I mean, I love classic cinema. I love foreign film. There's just so many movies that off the top of my head that I dearly love. I love Bob Fosse's All That Jazz is one of my top 10 favorite movies. I love I love my favorite Hitchcock movie is actually Rear Window. Which I dearly love. I love one of my favorite movies of all time is All About Eve.
We just talked about that a couple months ago. We did, yeah. I love it.
All About Eve I think has one of the great screenplays ever written, and one of the great, the prototype of the great modern. She's a very modern villainess. Anne Baxter's
Yeah.
Eve Harrington is one of the great villainesses of all time. Eve Harrington and Catherine Trammell from Basic Instinct, I think, are my two favorite femme fatales. She's not really, Anne Baxter's not really a femme fatale, but she is a femme fatale. She should have been in Double Indemnity, but she's not. But it's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I could watch all about Eve and Sunset Boulevard over and over and over and over.
Yeah, you and Brandon,
you just don't get that kind of wit anymore in Hollywood. You really don't.
Adult. Those movies were so adult. But then I'm also, I would love to have put Norma Desmond and Eve Harrington. Like, it would have been great if there could have been like the shared universe, like the MCU now. The shared universe. If there could have been a noir shared universe, what if Anne Baxter was a Norma Desmond? What if Eve Harrington was a Norma Desmond fan at the height of her career? She leaves New York once she wins the Sarah Siddons Award. She goes to Hollywood and meets Norma Desmond. I mean, where's that movie? Because that would be awesome.
I would pay to see that. Oh, I would. Absolutely.
And then, I just another, I love. I'm sure you watched Feud. But
I did. Yeah.
I mean, I saw this. I don't know what this means about me, but I saw Mommy Dearest 4 times in the theater when it opened. I loved it. I love Faye Dunaway from Network, and so I went and saw this movie. And it's what Joan Crawford. I mean, the way she was portrayed in Feud, that last episode was just heartbreaking. And she was
I know.
Oh my God, it was just heartbreaking. And I can't wait to get that on Blu-ray because I want to watch it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope we're not too far off topic, but
we're all right.
This is perfect.
We're all right.
So, you want me to go, Brandon?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, now people are all over. Back to Roddy McDowall, which, by the way, how cool is it that we're doing this the week that War for the Planet of the Apes opens? Because Roddy McDowall was such an integral part of all of the first 5 Planet of the Apes. The original, the 5. What is that? A quintrilogy?
Yeah. Well, we were having this conversation too because we just did our review of War this week, and I think it's the best of the 3 new ones. I think it's an amazing film, but also I'm one of the. I mean, obviously, Planet of the Apes, the original, is a masterpiece on itself. But I'm one of the few who actually liked Conquest and Battle for, even though the budgets were like this big. I just like the Caesar storyline with Ricardo Montalban and Roddy McDowall, and moving on from there. I love it.
Oh, it's funny. I mean, especially the R-rated cut of Conquest that they released.
Yes.
What's interesting is I mean, I had a Power. I don't know if you guys remember Power Records, or you had them when you were kids, but they were Power Records were like storybook records. They'd come with a comic book, and then you had a record.
Yeah, I used to get them from the library all the time.
And I had the Power Records Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And, I watched the movies many times. And Planet of the Apes, actually, the first Planet of the Apes literally changed my life because it was, let me tell you the story. I got to tell you the story.
Sure.
So I was like 6 years old, and I would watch anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And it was a Friday night, and my bedtime was 9. My parents were very strict. Some kids had to go to bed at 8, but my mother let me stay. My parents let me stay up till 9. And I was flipping channels. It was 9 o'clock. And, when you're 6 years old, it's like 9 o'clock and it's 9:01 and 9:02. You think you're getting away with something because your mom and dad haven't come down to put you to bed yet. So I'm flipping channels. Thinking, what am I going to find? What am I going to find? And I found what was clearly an astronaut. Like, I understood at 6 there was an astronaut. And he's talking into a ship's recorder, and I got that because I love science fiction. And he's like, century behind with no regrets. Just man still make war against his brother. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm watching, and I'm riveted. He goes into cryo sleep, and then the credits roll, and I thought the movie was over. But I was watching it because the Jerry Goldsmith score was mesmerizing, and the lights are playing across the screen, and I didn't know what was going on because credits, I didn't get it. And then the credits are over, and the ship they're in crashes into Lake Powell. And I remember it was like 9:05 or 9:06 now. And I booked upstairs. I just ran upstairs. My mom's in bed. And my mom had seen me like this. I was manic. I'm like, Mom, you have to let me. I have to step. There's a spaceship and it crashed in the water. And I have to see it. And there's these astronauts. And one of the women turned into a skeleton. Blah, 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 blah. And my mom's like, oh, my God. Because she'd seen me like this. And there was no except no for an answer. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And I had to get back down because I didn't want to miss anything. My mom's like, oh, okay. What is it? What's it called? And I go, it's called Planet of the Apes. And I don't know what that means because there's astronauts. And my mom just looks at me and she smiles and she's like, okay, you can go watch it. So, I go back down, and by then they're traipsing through the Forbidden Zone. And one thing leads to another. And, they took their clothes off. And I think I glimpsed weird nudity because I'd never seen nudity before. And I'm like, oh, my God, these men are naked.
And it was rated G.
It was red. Someone stole their clothes, and then when you get to the glade and you see the mute humans eating food and the astronauts are observing. And then in my young life, it was a truly transcendent moment when my imagination was unlocked, was when the apes show up and you don't know what's happening. You're seeing these sticks going back and forth and you're hearing this weird music. And then when the apes are finally revealed, one is revealed on horseback, and he rides into the frame, and there's a snap zoom up to the ape, and you hear Goldsmith's score going, and I lost my shit. Like, I'm a 6-year-old kid, and I cannot believe what it is I'm looking at, and my brain, my imagination just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing because this was not in my realm of experience yet. And I don't know if I had heard the phrase "to serve man, it's a cookbook" yet. I think I had, but I didn't know Rod Serling had anything to do with Planet of the Apes. But it was a very Twilight Zone-esque moment all the way through to, of course, the end of the film. Planet of the Apes is like a 2-hour Twilight Zone episode anyway, but it really changed. Planet of the Apes changed my life. It would be changed again by seeing Logan's Run, and then a year later seeing Star Wars, and 2 years after that seeing Alien. But Planet of the Apes was the first movie that blew my mind as a kid.
Well, it's one of those that transcends a lot of things too, because I'm a generation after you, and it's nice being not the old guy on the podcast for once. I do appreciate that. But I grew up watching those films with my father, and it's just I had the same reaction to this kind of the visceral nature of it, even when I was watching in the 80s. So it's definitely one of those that definitely stands the test of time.
Yeah, like all of them, it's really interesting because there is this kind of loose continuity between the films if you don't think too hard. But how did the aliens in Escape from, or how did the apes in Escape from Planet of the Apes actually rebuild that rocket and travel back? Who cares? They just did it. And there, when Paul Den came on board as the screenwriter for the Beneath, he was able to construct that, and they work. I mean, they're still great. I love all 5 Planet of the Apes movies to varying degrees for various reasons.
Yeah, I think Escape is probably my favorite just because of it's probably the first one I watched actually because it's probably on TV more than anything else. Right. But no, I definitely like Caesar's story, which is why I also really like Rise, Dawn, and War because they flesh out that story a lot more, and I just like Caesar as a character. Yeah,
no, it's great. Great stuff.
So let's talk about Marcus and Conrad. For Marcus and Conrad are 2 astronauts about to make a rocket ship journey to Mars, where we heard this plot before. Marcusson is an optimist. He believes that not only will they find life on Mars, but the people there will be just like them, because people are alike all over. Conrad is more of a skeptic. When they get to Mars, the rocket crashes and Marcusson is mortally wounded. Both of them hear tapping on the hull, and with his dying breath, Marcusson reminds Conrad that the people out there are just like him. Conrad opens the hatch to find that Marcusson was right. There are people here. They offer to bury his friend, fix his ship, and give him a place to stay. That place to stay is a house made just to look like one on Earth. Unfortunately, Conrad soon finds out that there are no windows and the doors are locked. Things didn't get worse when the wall in his living room opens to show that he is actually on exhibit in a zoo. Conrad looks up to the heavens at the end and reminds his dead friend that, yes, people are alike all over.
Still, I mean, a great classic Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah.
Again, when I was a kid, before I was story savvy, it was one of those endings where a really dark Twilight Zone ending, you know, where basically mankind is doomed to wind up in some alien zoo, you know, behind bars. But again, and Roddy McDowall is great in this episode.
He is.
Another one is they make all the people that find them when you meet the Martians, they're all like these beautiful people. So, you know, what could be wrong with that? You know, I've crashed on Mars, my friend died, but boy, there's lots of beautiful people here. So how bad can it be? So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and it's great because, you know, again, there's really like 3 sets. The ship set, then there's the crash, the exterior of the planet, and then which is just a studio set, and then there's the house. And it really shows you the economy, how they were able to make these incredibly indelible episodes, but do it for a very low budget.
Yeah,
oh, absolutely.
And some of the better episodes, and I think we were kind of talking about this last week with Long Live Walter Jameson, is the same idea. There's 3 set pieces in that one too. Is when they try to get a little too exuberant, they actually kind of lose you sometimes in some of these episodes. So the really strong ones tend to be on one set or a couple sets. I mean, and part of that is because when you're dealing with that kind of a low budget, you've got to make up for in other places. So the characterization, the acting, the cinematography is spot on for that.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. And 2 weeks ago when we were talking about A World of Difference, that was one of our major complaints, that you try and cram in 6 or 7 characters in a 25-minute setting in all these different locations, and it feels, you know, really thin. But when you have, you know, 3 or 4 characters on 1 or 2 sets, it's much more rich in character development.
Oh no, absolutely. And again, a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, people forget that they're really tour de forces of performance as well, because so often the central protagonist of the episode that protagonist carries that episode. McDowall's performance. Yeah. He has such a great face. I mean, Roddy McDowall was a child actor that grew up in Hollywood, became Hollywood royalty. And then even when he was in Fright Night in '85 playing Peter Vincent, you know, he had such a great career. And you can really see he has a really unusual but kind-hearted face. And that was what also made it worse, is that they fucked Roddy McDowall up, man. And like, why would you do that? That's terrible. You can't do that to nice Roddy McDowall.
Yeah, and
Alien Planet forever.
I mean, I'm sure my first experience with Roddy McDowall was, you know, Planet of the Apes, but Roddy McDowall for me came into like my consciousness with Fright Night, because I watched Fright Night way too many times on my father's Betamax tape. So I'm a big fan.
It's funny, I just recently acquired it. Came out on Blu-ray, and there's a Blu-ray that was released here by Twilight Time, but it went out of print. But there's a great British UK import that's all region that has this great hour-and-a-half documentary on the making of Fright Night. That aside from Roddy McDowall who passed away, it had everybody. You know, everyone from Amanda Beers to William Ragsdale to Evil Ed, everybody was in it. I mean, it's such a great film, and it's such a great performance from him.
Well, and also too, that film is a time capsule in what special effects used to be. Oh, all of that actual practical effects. And I still think some of it doesn't hold up, but some of it holds up better than any CGI you can throw out the TV today.
Well, you know, the effects were done by Richard Edlund, and his company had come off of Ghostbusters the year before, and Fright Night's effects were all shot in 65 millimeter, like the bat stuff, and there's some wonky makeup effects, but yes, the practical stuff in that it's really great. It's a great Fright Night's a really terrific film. I mean, a lot of people like the Monster Squad, which came out a couple years later, but to me, Fright Night was one of the great. It works as a teen film. It works as a comedy, and it also works as a terrific horror movie. and an homage to the horror hosts that we don't have anymore.
Yeah.
But Roddy McDowall's incredible in it.
I'm sitting here smiling because Monster Squad is one of my favorite films too. So
Oh yeah,
I am definitely a child of the '80s. That's just me.
But even as a child, Roddy McDowall just had it. He was just just from How Green Was My Valley and Lassie Come Home, movies like that. Just an absolute natural, not a hammy child actor whatsoever. He was always perfect from the very beginning.
absolutely. Yeah, no, he was phenomenal. And again, in terms of storytelling, I believe the episode begins in mid-flight, doesn't it?
It starts right where they're looking at the rocket ship, and that's when Rod's narration comes in.
Yeah, and let me get Rod's opening narration here in while they're staring at the ship. He says, "You're looking at a species of flimsy little two-legged animal with extremely small heads, whose name is man. Warren Marcusson, age 35, Samuel A. Conrad, age 31. They're taking a highway into space, man unshackling himself and sending his tiny groping fingers up into the unknown. Their destination is Mars, and in just a moment, we'll land there with them."
So good. It's just that writing. Oh my God, so good.
Well, and I love that when they're going to Mars, you see the rocket take off, and we've had so many. Brandon and I have pointed out because when you watch this series as it aired, there's a lot of this repeated themes. There's a lot of repeated storylines because the guy has to put together 36 episodes in a season, so he's going to have to repeat some stuff. So we've had a lot of these rocket ship stories and everything else. What I love about this one is because they're going to Mars and not some kind of abstract somewhere in space that we don't know where it is, they use some real photography of Mars back from the 60s, and that photography is iconic because it's the really low resolution photo of Mars that you can see the lines that a lot of folks assumed were canals, thank you, that are canals in there. So the whole, which bred so many science fiction stories about life on Mars until we realized it was just because our photography sucked at the time. But I love the fact that they use that photo of Mars to kind of give you the sense that there may be something up there too.
Oh, absolutely. And
the amazing thing compared to like the episodes we've looked at before with the space travel, this one isn't going where you think it's going. Even with stuff like The Lonely, which we've seen, or things like that, it's totally not, because you think you're going to be following these two guys, and then one of them ends up dying in the first quarter of the episode, and then it's Roddy for the rest of the time. So it's really, this one is very unique in the ones that we've seen so far with the space travel.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Roddy, and let's not forget Susan Collins.
Yes, true.
Oh yeah.
That was another thing. I don't think there's ever been a sexier period in television and movies than the 60s. For
I'm not gonna argue with you, sir. Not gonna argue at all.
Yeah.
I do also, with the Star Trek references, I love the fact that this is this storyline really is kind of redone with the cage and the menagerie, and in the cage and the menagerie, it's Susan Collins again playing that character, and basically playing kind of the same character, the kind of the trap.
Yeah. Well,
Susan Oliver.
Yes.
Susan Oliver. I'm sorry. Why am I keep Oliver?
Susan Oliver.
And actually, what we like to do each episode, though, is we like to kind of go through what works and doesn't work in each episode. So we'll start with you, Robert. What most to you works about this episode of Twilight Zone?
Well, I think I like the relationship between the two main characters.
Yeah.
And I like the again, there was always the optimistic ideal of that out in space. It's really interesting that, the idea that science was going to bring us to people that are also scientific and altruistic, and that whatever's out there in the great beyond is going to be waiting for us with open arms, and then you have a character that doesn't feel that way. And I thought that was really interesting, especially at the time, because the space race had begun. We were on the dawn of the Mercury 7 astronauts and what became the right stuff in the space race. It was all during the beginnings of that. The embryonic American space race was when the Twilight Zone really debuted. So, I love that. I think that the relationship of those two guys was really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that they cast Roddy as the cynical one, because if you look at what he usually plays, you would think you would cast him more as sort of the more innocent, optimistic one, but to cast him as the cynical character is really a nice twist to it.
Right, and they knew what they were doing when they were making that show, because he's totally moving against type.
Oh, absolutely, and it's great. Scott, what works for you in this episode?
Yes. We kind of already hit on quite a bit of it, which is great. What I also, as you've already mentioned, I do like the dichotomy between skepticism and optimism. And one of the scenes I really love is when Roddy is in the rocket, and Marcusson has just passed away, and he's talking to himself and talking to the body of his friend and saying, I know I need to open the door, but I don't want to. And it's that fear of not wanting to know what's going to happen. Even though you're scared to death, it's easier to deal with the situation when you just don't know what the answer is going to be when you open that door, and he kind of has to deal with that. And it's a little bit of the episode, and the fear kind of goes away pretty quickly, and he has to deal with other things. But I like that part of it as well, too.
Yeah, another thing I also like is like any great Twilight Zone, they lull you as an audience member into a false sense of security, because when that door is open and you come out and you see all those kind-faced Martians, and you think, oh, he's saved. I mean, oh, this is true. Now we know what a Twilight Zone ending is, but can you imagine when that first aired? It was. Oh, I know. I mean, what it must have felt like for audiences, coming out of the 1950s, where the greatest generation had won World War II, and now we're building highways across America, and everybody's living at home again, and the GI Bill put everybody to school, and America was a nice place to live, and boy, we're going out into space, but no, we're going to pull the rug out from under you, and you're doomed. So I can only imagine what audiences that must, and they did such a good job of lulling you. Those Martians were so damn nice. You just can't believe it.
Oh, I know.
We're going to fix your ship. We're going to bury your friend. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. It's
well, and one thing I noticed this last time watching it, though, I love that scene between Roddy McDowall and Susan Oliver where she really stresses no one's going to hurt you. And she says that a couple of times.
Yeah.
So they're lulling you into the security there, and you still have no idea what's coming. And it's interesting when you see them taking him into that nice little 50s living room, and you're like, what are they giving him this little tour for, and why is he here? And then all of a sudden, that twist comes, but it's just brilliantly executed. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone saw that coming, and the idea that the American home, but he now had, because people were going to school, the economy was booming. It was 1950s, late 50s America. And you're basically being given by these aliens the American dream, the home and hearth that every American wants, and then it turns out to be the worst place in the universe. Yeah. And it would have been so great watching that for the very first time in late 50s America, because, man, that must have been a gut punch.
Absolutely.
So good. And the way like Susan Oliver does say that, oh yes, we're not gonna get hurt. I mean, those Martians were bad, evil people. They really were.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Anything, Scott, we'll start with you. Anything that doesn't particularly work for you in this episode?
There's nothing really that stands out that's like, why the heck did they make that choice? I think some of the complaints we've had for the past few weeks have dealt with pacing, and that's one of the areas where I believe this episode does well again too, because nothing ever really lingers, but it also doesn't feel like you're getting rushed. You get some really good beats with Marcusson and Conrad. Then you've got some time where he's actually thinking he'll be fine. These guys are going to help him out. And then he also gets a little bit of time in the house by himself, kind of just enjoying it. And then he starts sensing there's something wrong with no windows and so forth and so on. But no, I think there's not much that truly kind of stands out for this one. This is not a easy one to pick apart because it's a good episode.
Yeah, it really is. And you're dealing with first season, so there was not a lot of repeated themes. I mean, I think if my only criticism is sometimes the conversation in the beginning of the episode between the two astronauts is a little didactic. I mean, it's a little, it's not like bros hanging out. They're clearly having, here's what this episode is about. Here are these two different philosophically minded men that are on opposite sides of the fence, and they do need to establish that. And I think that it's not necessarily Quentin Tarantino dialogue. It's very, here's what this episode's about, and this is the conversation that we're going to have, so you know exactly what it's about. If there's but again, at the time, it was transcendent, groundbreaking television, and they needed to do that. So that's not really a criticism. It's just, I think that element is a little, if anything, it dates the episode quite a bit, but that's okay.
That's It kind of adds to the charm of it and the elegance of it all, anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, I with this episode, I honestly can't point to anything that doesn't work for me. This episode really is a very solid, strong entry and a very strong first season. Scott and I have constantly talked through this whole process about how if you were to make contenders for the best first seasons of any show in TV history, this has got to be one of them.
Oh, absolutely. If not, yeah. It's just stunning. Yeah. And remember, I mean, back then, this was so innovative. This was so groundbreaking that it just can't be. It can't be. You can't stress enough how incredible this television really was.
Oh, I know, absolutely. When you think about the TV landscape during that time, and it really is a shame to me. I wish we had more anthology television on nowadays, where you have different stories, different actors every week. When they would do live theater on TV like Playhouse 90 and things like that. That was really an interesting time in TV history where you had a wide variety of stuff.
Well, I think also, you had a lot more people that were educated in letters, that were very writers, and these are people that had lived through World War II, and these are people that had a lot to say, and culture was changing so rapidly. You went from, think about it. We went from the Depression and Prohibition. You went from the Roaring '20s to Depression and Prohibition. Then you went into World War II. And then after World War II, then there was the 50s. That was the model America where everything was happening. And then there was a huge backlash in the 60s to all of that. But there was so many great writers. And I think that there was also a level of education. I mean, people are a lot more, they're a lot different now, but there was a classical education that people had that I don't know if they have anymore.
True.
It's different. But I think that's where a lot of these writers came from, people like Patty Chayefsky and a lot of these incredible writers that began in television, and Rod Serling and Charles Beaumont and guys like Matheson went on to write Star Trek episodes. I mean, these writers were unbelievable. So
yeah, really is amazing. As we kind of wind down here for the rest of this episode, Robert, we'll start with you. What are your just final thoughts, final impressions about People Are Alike All Over? Where does it stand for you in the whole Twilight Zone canon?
Oh, well, I think it's definitely one of the, I see Twilight Zone is sort of broken down into 4 tiers. There's top tier Twilight Zone episodes that most people could, even if you only have a cursory knowledge of the show, that's where they would go. And then there's the B episodes, almost as good, but then the C episodes are kind of the repeated episodes, the themes, something that we've seen before. And then the bewitching pool. That's the 4th.
I really like
Scott,
this guy. I like this guy.
And I think that's where I definitely think this is in the A list of episodes. There's 157 episodes of the Twilight Zone. I'm not
156,
sure.
Yeah, 156.
156. Okay, 156. I mean, this is if you break them down. So so let's say that there's, you know, for every, so I think this is probably in the top 25 episodes of Twilight Zone, but a lot of people might not put it there because it's quieter. It doesn't have, even though the ending is a dark whammy of an ending, it's a subtle ending. It's not I broke my glasses, you know, or it's not the pig-faced doctors from Eye of the Beholder. It's not one of those. So maybe it's just below the top 25, but I've always liked this episode a lot.
Me too. Well, Scott,
I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just gonna say.
Go ahead. Well, is it? Will the real Martian please stand up? Is that the episode of the Snowbound Diner?
Yes, that is one of my favorites.
Okay, absolutely one of my favorite episodes because you've got some great actors in that episode. Talk about Hollywood royalty, and then a young actor, and one of the great. But I also love that for a purely whammo sci-fi ending. You know, when you think it's good enough that the Martian is revealed, and then because the guy behind the counter, the soda jerk's been like the whole time, oh yeah, really? Like, I'm okay, whatever. And then when he turns and he goes, well, they're not coming, you see, and he takes off his. I mean, that to me, like, that's fucking awesome. Yeah, your Twilight Zone right there, and in a way. It kind of deals with the unexpected nature of aliens. So it's just in a different way. There's much more of an Agatha Christie quality to that episode. But that episode has more of a visceral, fun thrill at the end. Yeah. But I love both episodes. I mean, both episodes are about how people aren't really what they seem to be. And it's definitely up there. You know, it's definitely top tier Twilight Zone. But now that I think about it, in 25, maybe in the top 35 episodes.
Yeah. Either way, it's definitely one of the better ones all around.
Yeah. I was going to say, Scott, his ranking system of Twilight Zone episodes are pretty similar to the one you set up. Would you like to explain it?
Sure. For those who are just joining us, hello and welcome. We rank these episodes based on how they compare to other Twilight Zone episodes. So it's a ranking scale of 1 to 10. I'm losing my mind tonight. 1 to 10. 5 being an average Twilight Zone episode, 10 being one of the best Twilight Zone episodes of all time, and as I always say, number 1 would be Bewitching Pool. So, or The Fever. So, that's what we have.
Yeah. I think, The Fever is pretty much the worst one we've discussed so far, I think.
Center of Whipples or something like that.
But anyway, we'll start with you, Scott. Where would you put People Are Alike All Over on the scale from 1 to 10?
I agree with Robert on this. I think this is one of the top tier episodes. I believe that its message is really strong. You know, the idea that the optimist was right, but he was right for the wrong reasons, and the fact that yes, people are alike all over the place, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be good. It doesn't mean that people are inherently good. It means that people are inherently going to go with their basic instincts, and that means if somebody's different, even if it means they're from a different planet, they're going to be put on display because they're just odd and different. So I would give this episode a 7.
7? Well, I was going to go 1 higher than you. I was going to give it an 8.
Usually how it goes.
This is a
you are an easier scorer than I am, that's for sure.
I would definitely give it an 8 or maybe even an 8.5 because, like you just pointed out, you know, the fact that people are alike all over. I mean, when you think about, like now, how many Americans are incarcerated and how many animals are in zoos, and it points out, it makes you think. I mean, I remember thinking even as a kid, I'm like, well, we do have a lot of people and animals behind bars. So, and this guy is an alien. I mean, this guy, a human being, is an alien to the Martians. I mean, what's funny about this episode is that Martians look exactly like human beings, but they're like, this guy's from Earth. He's nothing like us. We're going to put him in this zoo. there's not like some interplanetary, interracial romance or anything like that. It's like this guy's clearly lesser than we are, even though they look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would give it.
He just can't read minds. That's the only difference.
That's true. Yeah.
And he doesn't have some cool looking togas to wear either.
No. But what's funny is it's Earth that made the journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the Martian land. Of course, what would be really interesting is what if they were just disguising their third arm for his benefit, and in actuality, will the real Martian please stand up as a sequel to it, by Roddy McDowell landing on Mars, that proved that the Martians that they could exist on Earth, and they sent William Demarest, is that who that is? William Demarest,
yeah.
And people are will the real Martian please set up? So they sent William Demarest as one of their lead scouts to plan the invasion of Earth. Back to that whole shared universe thing.
Yeah, you're all about the shared universes. I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Episodes take place in the same continuity in different, sometimes in the future. Midnight Suns, the future of the Twilight Zone world.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, yeah, that's great. But yeah, I like I said, I give it an 8. I think this is definitely a top tier Twilight Zone episode for me. And basically, as we wind down now for episode 25 here, Robert, it's been fantastic having you on.
Oh, well, thank you both. I mean, I'll be on. I love you guys. This is so much fun. I mean, you're my kind of people.
I gotta tell you, we've been doing this now for 2 years, and I've probably been on about 150 shows. Brandon, you've been on almost as many, I think. This is my best one, my favorite one so far. This has been fun as hell. I've really enjoyed it, and we definitely need to get you on as much as we possibly can. I know you're a busy guy, but we'd love to have you on again.
Oh, it's great. I mean, you're my kind of people, and I think what's great is what I really appreciate what you guys are doing is being younger than me, looking back at the classics. Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid and growing up, there was no such thing as an old movie. There were just movies I hadn't seen yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, also being that if 50 years of cinema history has transpired since I was born. So when I was born, I was that much closer to the dawn of cinema. But it's amazing to me how many people, especially younger people, when I was a cinema freak when I was a teenager. And it was also the dawn of the home video era where you could finally get movies and take them home and become a real scholar. But I just drank it all up, and I wanted to see all of them. And I don't see that even amongst big genre fans or movie fans today. There's not a lot of people. I hear this more and more, especially when I speak in colleges and things. They always like, "Oh, that movie's old." I'm like, yeah, that doesn't even compute with me because it like when I was a kid too. I mean, War of the Worlds, the first War of the Worlds, 1953 was my favorite movie until I saw Planet of the Apes. And it was how do you not go back and look at these films? But kids, when you've grown up with Jurassic Park, how do you go back and watch Valley of the Gwangi or Godzilla? It's hard. I get it.
I still think the first Godzilla is the best one.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. And I love Godzilla versus Monster Zero. It's so good.
Yeah.
So what you guys are doing is the Lord's work, sirs. The Lord.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Scott, before we close out here, you want to do some plugging and let people know about our new feed?
I am all for the plugging, but first, Robert, can you go ahead and plug what you got if you want to plug your Twitter and or anything else you want to throw out there too?
Oh, yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Burnett RM, Burnett RM, BURNETTRM, or you can find me on Instagram at RM Burnett, or you can find me on Facebook at Robert Meyer Burnett. And then you can always see me every week on Collider Heroes on YouTube.
Great. And for us, you can find us at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. As Brandon mentioned, we are on our own feed, so we're still part of what we're calling now the Front Row Movie Network, but we have made Zone-i-Sodes' own feed. So if you're catching this, I'm going to guess this one's going to be on the main feed. Jeremy, I'm assuming you're going to do this. So if you're catching this on our main feed, please check the show notes, and you can find the link to the main subscription link so you can get our secondary feed for just the Zone-i-Sodes episodes. We've still got a whopping 123 to go, or whatever it is. So of 121. So there's plenty of time to jump in and enjoy with us as well. You can also get a hold of us at Zone-i-Sodes. That's Zone. I can't speak today. ZONEISODES at gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. And we're continuing to roll on here. We've got about 10 more episodes until season 1 is wrapped.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I mean, it was a real honor.
No, the honor is all ours.
Thank you. Yeah,
we appreciate
absolutely.
it so much.
Thank you. And before we close out here, let me read Rod's final words from this episode. Species of animal brought back alive. Interesting similarity in physical characteristics to human beings in head, trunk, hands, feet. Very tiny, underdeveloped brain. Comes from primitive planet named Earth. Calls himself Samuel Conrad. And he will remain here in his cage with the running water and the electricity and the central heat as long as he lives. Samuel Conrad has found the Twilight Zone. So with that, I am Brandon Davis.
I am Scott McFarland.
And I'm Rob Burnett.
And we will see you on the couch.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Zone-i-Sodes. Zone-i-Sodes is a special presentation of the Front Row Movie Reviews podcast. For more information, go to www.thefrontrowmoviereviews.com.